Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing and That's Badass Wood Art. Remember to use promo code CTPocket for 20% off any one item at that'sbadasswoodart.com. And while you're here, be sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're doing a giveaway at 3,000 subscribers for a custom SKOL piece by That's Badass Wood Art. So graciously, Doogie is joining us this evening on the eve of the NFL draft. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well, Matt, although I could go for a beer. Having just heard you read that promo or verbalize that promo, I'm like, gosh darn, I need a beer, but I need to sprint out to baseball practice in a bit. Older son's got a little bit of a later practice under the lights, which is great. Then I should get home in time for tip-off for Kings-Warriors Game 5. So once the kids are asleep, I'll definitely crack open a beer or have a glass of wine. So I'm looking forward to that.
There you go.
Are you practicing outside this early, dude?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. They've been outside, Miles, for a bit. Yeah, I mean, they've had some indoor practices in the church in the West Metro, too. But, yeah. But then you look at the weekend, and it's like, crap.
Right.
Like, I don't know if we're going to be able to get any work in this weekend. The older son's first official game is on Tuesday, but they were supposed to scrimmage the back-to-back 10 and 11-year-old champion Edina Hornets a couple weekends ago. It would have been the weekend of – actually, it would have been last weekend. But unfortunately, the weather did not cooperate. Now, Edina might have kicked their behind. That's how good Edina is. You know, I mean, you're really good as a 10-year-old and 11-year-old. Guess what? When you're 12, you're really good as well. You just keep getting better and better. But that would have been a good test for my son for his traveling team. But it didn't happen, and I don't know if we'll reschedule. So, yeah, I mean, just it's that time of the year. I remember last year, draft weekend, my son played in the Icebreaker tournament in Elk River. They played really well against a pretty good White Bear Lake team on the Friday night, 8-1, 9-1, something like that. We're set to play Saturday and Sunday. We got rained out Saturday. We got rained out Sunday. It's April in Minnesota. Miles, I'm not joking when I say this. And, hey, if anybody in the audience wants to come at me, fine, so be it. I can handle it. April is the worst month in Minnesota. I hate April. Can we fast forward to May?
Right. I grew up in Duluth, and I played baseball, and so I even had it a little bit worse. So I hear you on that.
Well, let's talk Vikings draft. We're on the eve, and there's been a lot of steam, especially
What's up,
today.
You say hi?
He's already a pro. Pro. There's been a lot of steam about
Handsome
the Vikings.
Young man. He must have mom's good looks.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. It's all about mom. Thanks.
A lot of steam about the Vikings doing either trading up or trading back. I think Brett Coleman has been a big push today on Twitter, kind of saying like the Vikings want to move up. And we've also heard, potentially moving back to accumulate more picks. What are you hearing with the draft a little under 24 hours, a little over 24 hours away?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Matt. I mean, I was catching up with a high-profile agent early this afternoon. He had told me, his company, they can't recall this much uncertainty, whatever it is right now, 24-ish hours before the first pick. They can't recall this much uncertainty going back a really long time. And so there's so much intrigue, so much mystery. Now, the buzz I'd heard today was a little bit more trade back, not trade up, but I am not dismissing the possibility of trading up. I think that absolutely is one of many scenarios that they have kicked around in Egan. But just in the moment, if you're asking me right now, what's the latest intel I had heard? It was Kansas City at pick 31. Are they at 31, Miles? 31?
Yep.
Okay,
Super
so
Bowl
Kansas
champs.
City in the market for a receiver. And so they may have some interest, depending on how the board shakes out, going from 31 to 23.
Miles, I know you had a specific question just about trading up for Doogie.
Yeah, well, so Matt and I were talking about this, and I feel like I've been championing it for a while with the Vikings. Is the one thing that they haven't done in the history of this franchise is trade up aggressively to go get a franchise quarterback. They've always either let a guy come to them or they've traded back into the first to get like a Teddy Bridgewater, right? My question for you is, like, with this regime specifically, they feel like the type that's going to be a little bit more aggressive in that pursuit of that next quarterback, whoever it is, however they acquire him. My question for you is, do you think that they finally have like that leeway to do it? And do you think maybe Rick at one point kind of lost that opportunity to make a move like that?
Well, I think they do have the leeway, Miles, to make that sort of move. Like, I don't think Mark and Ziggy Wilf are like, hey, Kwesi, no, you can't do that. You can't give up our 2024 first. How dare you? You'll never, work here beyond your, initial contract. I mean, there's no dialogue, anything crazy like that. And so, yeah, I mean, they have the green light to certainly move up. Like, are you jumping Tampa at 19? Like, who exactly are you jumping? Are you trying to get above Tennessee at pick 11? Who is
That's
that
kind of
guy? Judd Zolgad. Now, you guys have had Judd on the podcast a handful of times. My colleague at SKOR North, and he's covered the NFL for a really long time, going back to his Star Tribune days, both on the Vikings beat and the Packers beat. So he certainly has a number of contacts. He had heard on Tuesday a little bit of C.J. Stroud's team. And, I don't even know what to make of these betting lines. And now Will Levis, is he like the betting favorite right this second to go pick 2? Okay, we think Bryce Young is going 1, but I'm not even sure if that's written in ink. Maybe that's more pencil, but we think maybe Bryce Young 1. Okay, Will Levis, but it won't be Houston at 2. So who's moving up to 2 to draft Levis? Okay, the Colts are taking a quarterback at 4, but who is that? Is that potentially Levis if Levis doesn't go 2? And so I'm just trying to figure out where exactly the Vikings need to get. But, I can just tell you, I mean, I've been saying this for many, many weeks. I mean, the amount of work they've done on these quarterbacks, I don't think you do all this work and don't end up with one. Now, it's possible, all the scenarios they're kicking around. Let's say they move from 23 to 31, okay? At 31, I think every position is in play outside of offensive tackle, that they wouldn't take a left tackle or a right tackle. You know what that means? I wouldn't be shocked. I would have bet a lot of money on this, but I wouldn't be shocked if they took the Alabama running back, Jahmyr Gibbs. I heard they like him, right? So a lot of people are going to be like, what? Running back with our first pick? Are you nuts? What are you talking about? Pass first offense? How could they go running back with their initial pick? But I'm just telling you, to me, that's one of many scenarios they have bandied about in Egan, because my intel is they like the kid. Now, do I think they take him at 23? I guess I'd be surprised on that. Now, could they move back further than 31, entirely trade out of the first round? So then they're picking early on Friday. Maybe it's Pittsburgh or Houston. Those were 2 teams I had heard early in the second, but there may be some others. New Orleans is another team behind them in the first round that has some interest in moving up. Right, so there's all these scenarios, but just the amount of work they've done on quarterbacks leads me to believe they are going to end up with some quarterback these next few days. I just don't know if it's going to be tomorrow. Is it Friday? Is it Saturday? I mean, Saturday could be the Stanford kid, right? It could be the BYU kid. It could be the UCLA kid, right? I mean, they've done enough homework on those guys. But on those first-round guys like Anthony Richardson, I was told today, outside of 2 to 3 teams, so 2 or 3 teams have spent more time with Anthony than the Vikings. So the Vikings are not number 1 on the list of teams that have spent the most pre-draft time with Richardson, but that the Vikings are right there after that, right? So there's a bunch of teams that had Richardson in for a visit, but apparently the Vikings connected with him somewhere along the way, more than Indianapolis. The Vikings have spent considerable amount of time with Richardson. Same with Hendon Hooker. As far as I know, he didn't visit Egan, but they connected somewhere along the way. Now, I don't know, maybe it's just a bunch of Zoom interviews. So when I say connected, maybe it wasn't necessarily in person. Maybe it was just 4 or 5 long Zoom interviews. But all I know is they spent a good amount of time with Hooker, with Richardson. I haven't heard as much Levis steam, but we know based on his former OC at Kentucky, knowing Kevin O'Connell well, their time together with the Rams, that, Kevin O'Connell's got the book on Will Levis. Whatever that book says, I don't know what it says, but whatever that book says, the Vikings certainly have it. And, I'll defer to my guy Judd, although, I've heard a little bit of the same steam, so I kind of echoed his thoughts when I joined him earlier this week that, if they did make a giant leap up, that Stroud would likely be the guy, right? That there's a thought that you don't need to get all the way up. I mean, I'd be shocked if the Vikings got up to 2 or 3. I mean, I guess never say never, because I'm not dismissing trading up. So I guess if you're trading up, I guess I would be pretty darn surprised, though, if they got as high as 2 or 3, Houston or Arizona. But if you're going that high, I'd be surprised if it was for Richardson or Hooker, that it would probably be Stroud.
In a trade-up scenario, do you sense that like a Dalvin Cook or a Zadarius Smith is on the table? And like, I'm just wondering if it's purely draft capital that they're moving in a scenario that they move up, or would they maybe try and attach Cook, Zadarius, just because there isn't closure on those two players?
Well, I mean, there will be closure soon enough, Matt. I mean, I just don't see either guy here. Certainly don't see Dalvin Cook here. Like that, I can tell. He's still not in Egan. Not that Zadarius is in Egan, but just I even heard something more today. I won't go into the specifics, but just something where you start connecting more dots. Those dots suggest Dalvin is not going to be here. Even, for sake of just fodder, like I hope this doesn't get aggregated. I am not reporting this, but I'll throw it out for sake of the conversation. Somebody told me, hey, you should check on, some of these guys have made formal trade requests, right? Like Jonah Williams with the Bengals. I'm probably leaving out a guy or two. Has Budda Baker formally requested a trade from Arizona? Yep. Okay, so, somebody told me you might want to check on, the idea that Dalvin, through his representation, has formally requested, something, whether it's just an outright release or a trade. Regardless of that, just everything points to Dalvin Cook not being here. Now, whether that's a transaction that takes place Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or it's later in the spring or sometime in the summer, just every sign points to Dalvin Cook not being here, and to a large extent, Zadarius as well, Matt. So, I mean, I couldn't dismiss that sort of possibility, but I've not heard of any specific intel that, hey, if they move back to whatever pick, that part of that transaction, Dalvin would be in it, or if they move up or whatever. I've not heard that specific intel.
Well, and Dalvin it's always social media, right? But he posted something on social media with him in a Pro Bowl jersey, and he covered up the Vikings logo. So that's how.
Oh, did he? I didn't even see that.
Yeah,
wow, so thank you.
I think it was Instagram. He did that yesterday, maybe.
Yeah, and hey, I'm a big Dalvin fan, and my understanding is pretty darn serious shoulder surgery. But at this point, he could probably pass a physical. Couldn't have passed a physical weeks upon weeks ago, but now he's in a position to be able to pass a physical. But if that surgery did what he thinks it'll do, there's another couple really, really good years in that body. To me, when Dalvin Cook is performing at a high level, to me, he's a top 5 back in the league. And if you want to debate that, fine. If we want to have a semantics debate, okay, no, he's more like 7 or 8 or whatever. But he's elite. He really is, And so I don't think he's going to be here, but the Vikings better be careful because they are going to miss Dalvin Cook. I'll leave it at that.
Outside of quarterback, we've obviously wide receiver is one of the top needs on this team, as well as cornerback. And I think people are maybe underrating the need at interior defensive line as well. But are there some other guys that, kind of have the attention of Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell as we head into this weekend?
Well, I mean, you think about the wide receivers that visited, right? I mean, Smith and Najigba from Ohio State, Addison from USC, Johnston from TCU. So clearly there's a good amount of interest in those 3 guys in particular. Maybe another guy. I just haven't heard as much Flowers, the BC kids team. But, hey, right? I mean, we still don't have a book on this regime. So,
I know it's tough.
They may love Zay Flowers, right? And we don't have that intel right now because they're trying to hide the fact that they love the kid. But, I've heard more just based on visits, USC, TCU, and Ohio State kids. So, yeah, I mean, it's wide receiver. It's, certainly cornerback. I mean, the more people you talk to, I mean, Deontay Banks came to town for a visit, right, from Maryland. He's the perfect schematic fit. And I suppose the fear is, what if Brian Flores is only here for a year? But presumably whatever scheme he's bringing in would carry over to 24 and so on. And you certainly need to grab a corner somewhere along the way, I would imagine. But, yeah, I mean, pass rusher, right? I mean, the Georgia Tech kid, Keon White, was in town. The young kid from Tennessee, he might be a little bit later on. But, they're looking at those pass rushers. Yeah, I mean, the Pittsburgh kid, he didn't come in for a visit, the interior defensive lineman, but they clearly like him a lot. Right. So, if they end up with that kid tomorrow night, it's not like I'm going to be like, whoa, didn't see that coming. I'm telling you, outside of left tackle or right tackle, and I suppose maybe guard, they may go guard later on, whether it's the LSU kid, Bradford, or, somebody else. But Like, I'm just telling you, based on, some stuff I've heard in the last 24 to 48 hours about Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, if I were making betting lines, I don't think I'd make the Vikings like the betting favorite to land Jahmyr Gibbs. But the word is the Vikings really like the kid, right? And so, he'd help. I mean, he'd be a nice complementary piece to Madison. He'd help the passing game, right? I mean, he can do some dynamic stuff. If you're thinking about helping the offense, like he'd help the offense in a different type of way than a traditional wide receiver, but he could certainly help. So that's what I'm saying, Matt. Like I'm not going to dismiss any of those possibilities. Even the Branch kid from Alabama, right? I mean, a lot of people think he's a safety, but he can play some slot corner. But Murphy's going to play slot corner, so where exactly would Branch fit in? But he's a freak of an athlete. They brought him in for a visit, so clearly there's a good amount of interest, right? So, like, I can't dismiss any of that, right? Like, I'd probably be surprised if Brian Branch is the guy, but the fact they brought him in, right? You can't completely dismiss it.
Miles, I'm sorry I muted you there for a hot second. Did you have something?
All good. My house is chaotic, so it's all good.
I can relate. Yeah, I can relate, Miles. Yeah.
My question, you kind of touched on the trenches. Obviously, guard probably not being a high priority early in the draft, but where do you think things stand with an Ezra Cleveland? Just because he's going into a contract year, same with a KJ Osborne. Do you think that they might be looking to try to find his future replacement, or do you think they might want to try to extend him at some point? What do you think the options there are for the Vikings at that position?
Yeah, Miles, I've not heard of any extension talks. Not that those couldn't pick up at a later date, but I've not been led to believe that they're showing this serious interest right this second in extending Ezra Cleveland. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't dismiss that. I mean, I don't think it's going to be tomorrow. I think it'd be later in the weekend. But, yeah, right. I wouldn't dismiss that at all. And, yeah, on wide receiver, on Osborne, they really like him. If I had to bet on the two, where there's more interest eventually in extending, I think it would be Osborne over Cleveland. But I've not heard of any specific at this moment, specific back and forth with Osborne's representation and the Vikings. But I can see them wanting him here long term. And I'm not saying they don't want Ezra here long term, but of the two, I can see them wanting KJ here for sure long term.
That makes sense. And then you probably want to see if you can get a Jordan Addison, a Jackson Smith and Jigba first, because then how are you investing in that position? So that makes sense.
Yeah, now on Smith and Jigba, I mean, is he going to go as high as the Packers at 13 now, right? I mean, does Green Bay go wide receiver?
They never take a wide receiver first.
Yeah, I mean, I know conventional wisdom says no, they just don't do that. But
to piss off Rodgers,
classic that Aaron Rodgers is gone and they finally go wide receiver in the first round. But New England at 14, there's some interest in receivers, and so maybe Green Bay thought, hey, part of this Rodgers transaction. Yeah, maybe it seems minuscule on the outside, 15 to 13, but we had to get ahead of New England for a very specific reason, right? So, I mean, I still have a hard time believing Smith and Jigba gets all the way to 23. He's such a stud. He really is. I know the injuries were a factor in 22, but you go back to 21, stud. I mean, so good. I mean, go back and watch that Rose Bowl. I mean, he's just so darn good. And, you go back and watch the pro day and just the way he was running routes and all that. I don't see a scenario where that kid's getting to 23, but heck, and I'm telling you, there's as much mystery and intrigue, 24 hours out with this draft as any in recent memory. And so,
that's
to the point where, I don't think, anything is going to shock me, right? I think, just overall, I just think there's so many different scenarios on the table. I think Bryce Young goes one, but I'm not going to sit here and say 100% definitively, yeah, Bryce Young is going one to Carolina. So there's just so much mystery. So, I mean, I guess maybe Smith and Jigba gets to 23, but I guess I'd be mildly surprised. How about that?
Quick question back on the quarterbacks for a second. Do you sense that Kirk Cousins, obviously I don't think approve is the right word, but if the Vikings were aggressive or even just drafted a quarterback this weekend, which I think many people probably expect at some point, whether it's first round or day 2 or day 3, do you think that Kirk Cousins will, kind of ask to be, depending on where that quarterback is taken, asked to be released, traded? Do you sense that he'll just continue to play out the final year of his deal here, and then just part I can't say the word.
Amicably.
Yeah,
I mean, I get what you're saying, Matt. I think it'd be more the latter, that
Okay.
he's still going to be a pretty good soldier, that he still has enough respect for Kevin O'Connell, that he wouldn't be a disruptive force. Like, he's not going to be a pain in the ass.
That's good.
Now, hey, if they move up for CJ Stroud, like if they shock us, and hey, some people think CJ Stroud might fall, not like big time, but maybe it's Justin Fields-esque, right? When pre-draft, we thought Justin Fields might go, whatever, top 5, and he ends up falling to 11. In fact, the Vikings. I mean, Rick Spielman, who I caught up with the other day. I mean, Rick had genuine interest in moving up for Justin Fields.
I don't buy that one.
Yeah, well, he did.
No, I mean that in the like what we heard of what he offered to move up, more than like, not that I think he wanted to get Justin Fields, but it's more of like the offers that we heard he used to try to get up were very low.
Yeah, I didn't hear any specific intel. I didn't hear like any sort of like big time aggressiveness, Miles.
Yeah.
But there was legit Spielman interest in Justin Fields. So I mean, is it possible that Stroud is that guy? That he starts to fall tomorrow night? Now, I mean, I would think his floor would be Tennessee at 11. Like, does Stroud get below 11? But like at that point, what would it take to go 23 to 10? Right? Could you pull that off, or to 9? I mean, you're giving up your 24 first-round pick. If you need to give up your 25 first-round pick too, you may not to get to 9, 10-ish. You would to get up to 2 or 3. But that'll be something I'm intrigued to see play out tomorrow night. What happens with CJ Stroud? But I'm just saying, Matt, like if it's Stroud, okay, that to me, that's where it gets a little interesting and dicey, right? So we could circle back to this very point if it happens. But if it's more a scenario of maybe moving up a little bit for a Richardson or a Hooker, or staying at 23, drafting one of those guys, or moving back, and one of those guys ends up falling, like Spielman told me the other day, there's 21 or 22 teams, his intel, based on some conversations with Napier, the head coach at Florida, that there's a bunch of teams that don't have Anthony Richardson with a first-round grade, right? So, I mean, depending on what these other quarterback-needy teams and who has him with the first-round grade and positional need and all of that, I mean, some team might have him with the first-round grade, but some other guys on the board, and so they pass on Richardson, right? But, like, Richardson needs to sit a year. Hooker needs to sit a year, although I guess his doctor sent a note to all teams that the ACL recovery is ahead of schedule. And I know Hooker put some video on social media today where he's now doing some dropbacks. And so he's progressing nicely. But like Hendon Hooker's not starting week 1, right? So if you end up with Hooker or Richardson, I mean, Cousins isn't going anywhere. And, until I hear otherwise, I don't think he's going to be a pain in the butt. Now it's not necessarily his job to be like this uber mentor. Maybe it'll happen organically, naturally, but, with Phillips and O'Connell and, other people at TCO, right? I mean, whoever the rookie quarterback will be, that person will have plenty of fingerprints on them.
For sure. I know you don't have a whole lot of time here with us. So, Miles, do you have any final questions here for Doogie before he goes out and watches some baseball?
Yeah, it's kind of like a two-parter, I guess. When I look at the systems for the quarterback potential first round, it feels like Richardson's like that, the reason they would move up to 3. And then it feels like Stroud would be why they'd move up to like 9, 10, that range. And then Hooker's like a trade back scenario. But I ask all that to say the Trey Lance news that has come out recently that, maybe he's on the block, maybe he's not. Who knows what they're going to do with him. How much steam do you think there actually, or interest from the Vikings, do you think there actually has been? And a part of that, do you think that's something that the Vikings would consider exploring if they missed on a Stroud, Richardson, even maybe a Hooker? Do you think they would maybe get a little bit more aggressive maybe on Friday or what have you to make that type of move?
Yeah, I mean, the question is, Miles, do you take John Lynch at face value, or was he lying to us the other day saying, I'm paraphrasing, but that essentially Trey isn't going anywhere? I would bet a lot of money, Miles, on Trey's name coming up internally in Egan. I'm not ready to say that I can confirm the Mike Florio Pro Football Talk report, that there was actual trade discussions, dialogue, however you want to classify it, at the combine in late February in Indianapolis. But yeah, I think his name has come up in Egan. I mean, heck, I'll set my conversation with Rick Spielman again. Just Rick told me, I mean, and there's enough carryover. That's why I'm citing Rick's name, that, a bunch of people that worked for Rick are still working for the Vikings. They did a lot of work on Trey pre-draft 2021.
I'd heard they really liked him.
They liked the kid a good amount, and a number of those people are still in the building. And so, I don't see how the name wouldn't come up, at least internally. I don't know if it's gotten to the point of actual trade discussions, but we know Kwesi, his time in San Francisco, he's got those relationships. Oftentimes it's easier to trade with somebody that really, really well. So whether it's John Lynch or, the number 2 or number 3 guy or number 4 guy in San Francisco, Kwesi's got those relationships, right? So, I don't think it'd be a real hard trade if San Francisco is willing to make the move to actually get done. I'm not, put it this way. He's still on my radar, Miles. I'm not saying okay, John Lynch said this earlier this week or a few days ago, whenever it was, late last week. Okay, that story's done and over with. Still very much on my radar. So I'm not dismissing that one either, that, depending on how things shake out and if they don't end up with a quarterback early, that maybe eventually, maybe something does happen. I think after you sign Sam Darnold and you've got Purdy now, it's hard to see a future for Trey Lance in San Francisco. So to me, it's, when not if they make a move on Lance. Now, maybe it's Tennessee or somewhere else, but I do think his name has come up in Egan. And so as long as I'm led to believe that, he's still very much on my radar.
Feels like more player trades during the draft, and there goes my dog. More player trades during the draft seem to be more popular than ever before.
Yeah, or even, heck of a job by Ryan Poles to get DJ Moore out of Carolina in that trade. So, sure. I still wonder about Austin Eckler with the Chargers. I still wonder about DeAndre Hopkins. Now, that's so much money. Arizona probably would have to eat some money. But, Budda Baker and Jonah Williams and certainly Dalvin, right? And, remains to be seen on Za'Darius. Danielle Hunter's still a story at some point here. Yeah. As far as I know, I don't believe he's been in Egan. Not that he has to be. Not mandatory. Do not need to be there right now. But a lot of guys are, right? So, interesting, at least noteworthy when a guy isn't out there. All that stuff is still it's top of mind for me, Miles. So I would echo what you said though. Yeah, we are seeing a good amount of player type transactions. It's not just draft pick compensation. So I imagine, some players going to get moved this weekend, and as long as the Dalvin situation is what it is and it's not changing anytime soon. Yeah, that's another thing that's very much on my radar. Could Dalvin move as soon as this weekend? It's coming. So could it be as soon as this weekend?
Where does John Michael Schmitz land this weekend? Any predictions?
Well, I heard the private workout with Steve Hutchinson, the Hall of Famer, the former Viking, who's now a consultant for the Seattle Seahawks, went very, very well. And so I wonder about Seattle, but I also wonder about the New York Giants. They've done a lot of work on him. The Jets re-signing McGovern. I imagine knowing the Jets had done a decent amount. He visited the Vikings. I don't think the Vikings, though. I'd be thrilled to see it, but I don't think the Vikings. The Bills have done a good amount of work, but if my money was somewhere, well, it'd be two places. It would be either the Seahawks or the New York Giants.
I think Daniel House, when he was on our show a couple weeks ago, he shared that same feeling. He feels like that's probably where he'll land. So, well, thank you.
Wait, before you go, Doogie, final Vikings prediction. What's your final, whether it's a trade up, trade back, it doesn't have to be a specific player, but what's your final prediction for the Vikings tomorrow night?
You know what? I said a few days ago on TV, Miles. So, I get it. It's fluid, right? We're talking here on Wednesday early evening. And so Sunday was seemingly a really, really long time ago in the world of pre-NFL draft dialogue. But because I'm on the record on Sunday saying I see trade back, and that's what I was hearing most recently, as recently as this afternoon, some steam on that. I'll continue to say that. But I'm just saying I'm not dismissing the possibility of a trade up or no trade, coming to fruition and them staying at 23. But I can see, just based on having 5 picks, only 2 picks in the top 100, 2387. You need more than 2 swings in the top 100. And hey, I would do the TJ Hawkinson trade again, and they'll sign him to a long-term extension at some point. Nothing imminent as far as I know, but I see him here for many more years. And so I endorse the trade, right? But that's why you don't have two. And so you've only got these two swings in the top 100, 23 and 87. So that's why I'm thinking you move back to get another swing in the top 100.
Perfect. I
Love it.
I just love that there's so much mystery still. I feel like back when we had Rick, we could probably pinpoint who he was going to go for, but with Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell, nobody knows, and that's the joy of this season, this time of year. So.
I'll even remember, Matt. So back in my KFAN days, I hosted a pre-draft party. This is when the draft was just one day, so it was a Friday night party at Bunny's in St. Louis Park. The Troy Williamson year, was that 07 or 08?
07, I think.
And so it was like a Miller Lite or Bud Light or something party, and so they had some personalities from the fan there, including me, and they wanted us to entertain the crowd, and so I grabbed the mic and had it nailed. I mean, and I don't think I was the only one, but it was like, hey, like they're taking tomorrow Troy Williamson, this wide receiver from South Carolina.
That was 05.
05. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
so yeah,
it's
that's
right
what
after
happens,
Randy
Miles, when you
left.
get old. I'm in my mid 40s now. I have to go see the doctor tomorrow. I was talking to my doctor on the phone the other day. He's like, just a reminder, you're now middle aged. I'm like, oh, gosh, darn, that's right. Yeah. Thanks for putting it in those terms, right? And I've got a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. So that's what happens, or soon to be 9-year-old in June. That's what happens, Miles. All these years start to blend together. 07, 08, or 05. But yeah, 05. So 2005 on a Friday night, the draft was all on Saturday. I was at Bunny's in St. Louis Park hosting that party and hopped on the mic and said, hey, get ready for it. The Vikings tomorrow are going to take Troy Williamson. And so, yeah, it was even before Spielman, but we're still gathering the book on Kwesi, right? And so we don't have rock solid intel. So I'd love to tell you, like, I know definitively 100% how it's going to shake out tomorrow night, but I don't. And, there are so many scenarios too when you're picking 23 compared to 7 or wherever Williamson went. Was it 7 or 8 or something like that?
Yeah.
Right.
7.
I mean, there's just not as many scenarios when you're picking that high. When you're picking a 23, but I'm following the trail, the breadcrumbs, right? I mean, those out in Egan say, hey, like all these scenarios are in play. Trade up, trade down, stay at 23, a bunch of different positions. I mean, again, wouldn't bet on tackle, but can't really dismiss any other position. So, yeah, I mean, more mystery than I can remember. But, yeah, I mean, 05, nailed it. Other years, had a really, really good idea heading into it. Don't necessarily have as much an idea, but I can provide the information on, hey, the Vikings spent this amount of time doing this, doing that, right? And so to at least give, a little bit of a hint of what they're thinking.
It's kind of fun not knowing, because under Rick, we knew for so long. Like, we knew Garrett Bradbury. We knew who else did we know? We knew wide receiver like 2013. Was it like Cordero? We didn't know Cordero passing.
Well, I mean, Trey Waynes, I don't think was a hard one to pinpoint. I don't think Laquan Treadwell actually was that hard of a one to pinpoint. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence with Rick, which is interesting, Miles, because, and I've got a good relationship with Rick, but like when he was the GM, it was like, he would like confiscate cell phones. He would go out of his way to ensure that there weren't leaks. And it's like, Rick, you got so much other crap to worry about. Like, who cares? Right. I mean, this is all fun and games. Like if something gets out, I mean, who knows if it's true or not anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was out of control on that front, just trying to prevent stuff from being leaked. Like tapping phones internally and confiscating cell phones and just all this stuff. Like Rick was incredibly paranoid about information getting leaked. But it always did. I mean, that's the thing. It always did.
Always. That's what I mean. Like, that's the funny part is like we literally knew Garrett Bradbury was going to be the pick in 2019. I feel like that was like the biggest. That was like the worst. They were picked at 18, and we still knew that he was going to be the pick. Like,
it's just incredible.
It's funny to me.
I know. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. Enjoy baseball with your son. Enjoy the chaotic weekend that is about to ensue, because I know we'll be busy here, but you'll be busy on your end as well.
Yeah, and it's even fun for me to see, a kid like Evan Hall, who I first got to know at Maple Grove High School, right? Didn't play varsity football until 11th grade. and he'll get drafted this weekend. I don't know exactly when, but enough teams like him, the Broncos, the Packers, some others, like that's really cool for me. Like I'll be tracking the Vikings, no doubt, but just to see where some of these other kids land. I mean,
For sure.
he may not get drafted, but like I love Mariano Sori-Marin, the former Gophers linebacker. Right. I think about Jack Gibbons, the former Gophers linebacker, who's now, heck, is he first or second depth, chart wise for the Tennessee Titans, was an undrafted free agent, but he climbed the ladder. I mean, Mariano could do something like that. Mo Ibrahim, right? One of the greatest running backs in Gophers history. Excited to see where he lands. And so, just all sorts of different angles. Nash Jensen, an offensive lineman from North Dakota State from Osseo High School. Brent Lang, an offensive lineman from Minnesota Duluth. Like, how often does Duluth get a kid to the combine? Like, he went to the combine. That's a really big deal. And so I don't know if he gets drafted this weekend or not, but if not, he can be a priority free agent. But like kid like that from Lakeville North High School, excited to see where he lands. So yeah, definitely be a fun time on Saturday.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For everybody watching or listening, thank you for joining us. Remember, like and subscribe to be entered into the drawing to win a custom SKOL piece by That's Badass Wood Art. We have tons of coverage coming up this weekend, including reactions to every pick as they happen. And Daniel House will actually be joining us for a few of those as well to give his insight, because I don't think anyone knows college football quite like that man.
Nope.
So
trust me, he forgets in 5 seconds more than I'll ever know when it comes to analyzing this guy. Daniel House is a rock star. Daniel House is a superstar.
Yes, we love him over here. So gracious that he's going to join us this weekend. But until next time, everybody, SKOL Vikings.